no macular degeneration, none, right? But I'm going to back up just for a second. If I left it right there, I need to put this in here. The fact is, they weren't in perfect shape though. They had their dental condition was terrible. They had very poor dentition, and arthritis was common. Why? Because I think they had so little animal fat. They had so few fat-soluble vitamins, especially A and K2. I think this was a significant problem for them. But compared to us, they were healthy. Of course, they had no refined flours or sugars, and of course, no vegetable oils. No traditional population has vegetable oils. They're a product of the Industrial Revolution. So what was their omega-6? 0.6%. You won't get lower omega-6. This is critically and fundamentally important, and I'm going to hit this several times to drill this point home. Western diets, again, 7 to 12% since 1990 is where the world is. Next, let's talk about the Inuit, because they're carnivores, all right? Their diet, traditionally, seal meat and blubber, whale meat and blubber, caribou, reindeer, and then tiny, tiny amounts of vegetable food, typically just whortleberries and seaweed in their very short summer, all right? But they gorge on fat, and they're healthy, right? Just like this article says. They really were. So this is August and Marie Crow, scientists, who won many honors for their work. In 1908, they completed an expedition on the diet and metabolism of the so-called Eskimos of Greenland. I don't use the term Eskimos, that's considered pejorative today. This is what they said. The Eskimos are probably the most exquisitely carnivorous people on Earth, surviving for long periods absolutely without vegetable food. They said the diet does not appear to have any injurious effects whatever upon the people. They did not find heart disease or cancer. They made no mention of that in their studies. So here's the diet. So they had lots of calories, 2,559 per day, 44% protein, 47% fat, 8% carbohydrate, half of which came from the glycogen in the freshly killed meat that they were eating. All right, so it's a high fat and high protein diet, obviously. All right, so then their study was followed by this man, Arctic explorer Vilhjalmur Stefansson. And Stefansson lived among the Inuit for 10 winters and 13 summers between 1906 and 1918. His goal, to find out, did they have cancer? Because it was said for decades that the Inuit, the Eskimos, did not have cancer. Stefansson finally published this book shortly before he died in 1960. And in this book, he wrote this. Cancer was not to be found among Eskimos who still lived native style. They could not find it. This was so convincing, the American Museum of Natural History even wrote this in 1914. Cancer is said not to be found among the Eskimos. So they didn't have a heart disease, they didn't have cancer, and as far as we look clear to 1962 to 64, when they're still on their native traditional diet, diabetes affected 0.06% of Greenlanders. That's about 2 or 3 people out of 4,249. That's how rare it was on their native traditional diet, okay? But again, they had no refined flours or sugars, 0 vegetable oils, right? What did that make their omega-6? 0.6%. Same amount of omega-6 percentage-wise as the Papua New Guineans of Tukasinta, who were consuming 3% of their diet as fat. Interesting, right? Okay. Western diets, again, 7 to 12% omega-6 linoleic acid. All right, moving on to South Pacific Islanders. And we're going to look briefly at the Catawbans, which came up earlier this morning. Staffan Lindeberg studied the Catawbans back in 1991. He lived with them for 6 weeks, and he found their diet was very, very different than the previous 2 we talked about. Diet of tubers, fruit, fish, and coconut were their staples. All right, here's what he said about them. Available data suggest rarity or absence of cardiovascular disease, essential hypertension, obesity, and non-insulin-dependent diabetes mellitus in truly traditional ethnic groups. Sudden cardiac death, stroke, and exertion-related chest pain are non-existent or extremely rare in Catawbans. All adults have low diastolic blood pressure, and all are lean, all of them. right? The intake of oils, margarine, cereals, and sugar is negligible. It was just almost none. Here's the breakdown on their foods. You can see it's low-fat diet, low protein, high carbohydrate, 69%, relatively high. Saturated fat is high, at 17%. Omega-6, less than 1%. So here's the main points. No vegetable oils, omega-6, less than 1% in the Catawba studies. Again, Western diets, 7 to 12%. Are you sick of me saying that yet? No, I'm sure you are. All right. But just today, we've looked at these three populations. These Papua New Guineans, 94.6% carbohydrate, Catawbans at 69% carbohydrate, and Inuit Eskimos at 8% carbohydrate. You can continue doing this with all these different populations. It's pretty interesting. Yet all of these populations are healthy, right? What do they eliminate? Vegetable oils, right? That's what they eliminate. This is always true in my opinion. All right, so healthy traditional populations do not have refined flours, sugars, processed foods, or vegetable oils. Of course they don't, right? What about the omega-6? It's 0.6 to 1.7% is what it runs and what I've found so far in these truly traditional populations consuming their native traditional diets. Again, I won't say it. There it is, the omega-6 in Western populations. All right, now quickly, I'm going to talk about Westernized diets, seed oils, and the downfall of these countries, Japan, China, United States, and we've got to do Australia since we're here. All right, so let's look at Japan because this is one of the most interesting of all countries, in my view, in terms of what we find in their diet. So this is their nutrition transition. I want to show you this. We're going to look basically at the consumption of their food about 1960 versus 2009. So look at their total calories was 2837 in 1960. This is all published data. By 2009, they dropped almost a third of their calories down to 1,850. Carbohydrates were high at 84% in 1960. They end up in 2009 at 56%. Sugar was at 196 calories in 1961, peaked at 384 calories in 1989, and then dropped back down to 282 calories by 2010. That sugar was down 27% between 1989 and 2010. What about the fat consumption? It was 5% in 1960 when they were healthy. In 2009, 27%. So their fat went up more than fourfold. What about the saturated fat? 7%, which is about the lowest in the developed world. All right, here's the interesting thing. The seed oils, 81 calories in 1961, increased all the way to 351 calories by 2010. So it went up 4.5-fold. And by the way, their seed oil consumption was about 2 to 3 grams in 1950, if you went back that far. That's how low they were. Now, I'm going to quickly define sugar because I get this question all the time. Will people think I'm leaving out corn syrup and high fructose corn syrup? All this data comes from the FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. Here's their definition. Added sugars include sugars added during the processing of food, such as sucrose and dextrose, foods packaged as sweeteners, such as table sugar, sugars from syrups, which would include, I've added this in, corn syrup, high fructose corn syrup, maple syrup, etc., and honey and sugars from concentrated fruit or vegetable juices. They continue on this. They state, for most Americans, the main sources of added sugars are sugar-sweetened beverages, baked goods, desserts, and sweets. So this is every kind of sugar. When I say sugar, that means everything you can add to the diet. It's not fruit sugar or vegetable sugar. It's just coming from added sugars, all right? So back to this data. Now we're going to look at, this is just obesity in men only, all right? 16% obesity in 1977, I believe it was. And look where it climbed to, 31.2% by 2009. So obesity doubled, while the calories, the carbohydrates, and the sugars all decline, right? But what's the one thing going up? And you can see, look at the vegetable oils versus the obesity. Striking correlation, right? Okay. How about diabetes? So you can see here, Diabetes in 1954 in Japan, 0.02%. That's 2 per 10,000. All right, where is it in 2009? 6.9%. This is a 345-fold increase between 1954 and 2007. All right, but look at it. And again, this is while sugar, carbohydrates, and calories are all on the decline, right? Sugar declining since 1989. This data ends in 2007, right? But look what it's in relation to. As you know, with the vegetable oils, the one thing going up. Okay, how about breast cancer? So this is breast cancer, and we see back in 1975, breast cancer incidence was 21.7 per 100,000 people. All right, by 1999, breast cancer incidence was 101.4 per 100,000. So breast cancer went up 5-fold between 1975 and 1999, again, in correlation to the vegetable oil increase. This is macular degeneration, AMD, the leading cause of irreversible vision loss and blindness in people over the age of 50 worldwide. You can see in the late 1970s, macular degeneration affected 0.2% of the population. By 2013, 16.37% of the population over approximately the age of 42 to 50 is affected. So it's up 82-fold between the late 1970s and 2013. Again, while calories, carbohydrates, and sugar go down. But it's, again, striking correlation to the vegetable oils. So here's their omega-6. If we go back to 1960, over here on the left, you see their omega-6 was 1% of the diet. This is where it should be. Remember I said it should be under 2%, right? And where are they in 2009? 7.8%. So the omega-6 went up 7.8-fold, right? So back here in 1960, they're lean, fit, healthy, practically disease-free, chronic disease-free. In 2009, they're riddled with overweight, obesity, diabetes, metabolic syndrome, cancer, and macular degeneration. All while the calories, carbohydrates, and sugars went down. But again, the vegetable oils in this country is the one thing going up. Let's take a look at China.